Welcome back, everybody. 14 after the hour, and time for us to go behind the headlines. And our headline today comes from our local paper, the Portland Mercury. And in the Mercury today, we have the headline, Reefer Madness. The fight over legal weed has inspired fresh complaints from all over the map, including the State House. This was posted by Dirk Vanderhart, and I actually spoke to this reporter yesterday. Clatsop County District Attorney Josh Marquis says Oregon's debate over legal weed is fast becoming a, quote, real contact sport, end quote. One that's grown more personal than he expected. You don't have to look far to see what he means. The contentious race over Measure 91 is erupting in complaints and attacks with less than 2 months to go before the November 4th election. Let's start with the most recent. Marquis, the state's most strident critic of legal weed, filed a complaint with state elections officials earlier today against radical Russ Belville, a longtime Portland marijuana activist and host of the online radio program The Russ Belville Show. Marquis says an investigation into him by Belville, financed by thousands of dollars in donations, is a thinly veiled effort to fight for Measure 91. As such, Marquis says Belville needs to report his donations and expenditures with the state. Now, first of all, let me just interrupt that because it's very ironic that he thinks me looking for open records requests on an event they're trying to produce that they claim is educational and has nothing to do with Measure 91. Well, that's the pot calling the kettle black, ain't it? Anyway. Meanwhile, Marquis is named in a pair of complaints filed earlier this month, including a letter from 4 state legislators calling on Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum and the Oregon Secretary of State's office to investigate whether public resources are being inappropriately used to fight the pot measure. Those complaints have to do with a marijuana educational tour of the state scheduled for next month. As initially planned, the tour involved events in 13 Oregon cities and featured a prominent national anti-pot speaker, with much of the focus being on marijuana and its potential downsides. But the whole thing was thrown into chaos over concerns, including those of a pro-pot U.S. congressman, that it was little more than an effort to oppose Measure 91 using federal dollars. The federal funds were pulled, and it's unclear just how many of the original events are still in the works. But State Senators Chip Shields, Floyd Przansky, and State Representatives Paul Holvey and Alyssa Kenny Geyer said in a lengthy letter on September 11th they are concerned public employees and resources are still being used to plan the tour. They're asking the Oregon Department of Justice to look into the matter, along with election officials. The lawmakers wrote, quote, by all appearances, the tour and its sponsors are violating Oregon law. The DOJ says it hasn't decided whether to investigate and is waiting to see what the Secretary of State's office turns up. A local pot activist has also filed a complaint against the educational tour. Side note, I believe that's my friend Jennifer Alexander who's filed that complaint. In the complaint he filed this morning, Marquis says Belville is effectively campaigning for Measure 91 and so should be required to register with the state. Quote, he is obviously free to criticize and even lie about my record in his own blog, on his own internet radio show, or by giving away articles to places like the Huntington Post, Marquis wrote in an email sent to the Oregon Secretary of State's office, continuing, quote, but when he raises and expends thousands of dollars to affect the outcome of an imminent ballot measure, he is required to register with the Secretary of State and report the name, amount, and occupation of his contributors, end quote. Marquis is citing an Oregon law dictating that anyone who spends more than $750 in a calendar year to support or oppose a cause must file a statement with the Secretary of State. As support for his contentions, the DA offers a link to the crowdfunding site set up by Belville to, quote, help us fight the use of public funds to defeat marijuana legalization in Oregon, end quote. That fundraising campaign had raised $2,435 as of this afternoon. By the way, it raised another $300 once word of word of Marquis' complaint against me came in. So thanks. Continuing, quote, I'm just a citizen who's concerned that the district attorney and others in the state and county government have been using grant money to illegally campaign against Measure 91, Belville tells the Mercury. My actions have merely been to gather records, end quote. In a lengthy blog post on his site, Belville details record requests he's filed for communications by 5 Oregon district attorneys regarding the educational series. Paying for those records requests, he argues, doesn't come close to campaigning. In his complaint, Marquis also charges Belville with being the author and creator of the website joshmarquisexposed.com, which appears as a sponsored link when you Google search the DA's name. The site is full of lies, Marquis complains, though he acknowledges he's fair game as a public official. By the way, for the record, I didn't create JoshMarquisExposed.com. I didn't buy the domain. I didn't set up the WordPress blog. I have nothing to do with running that thing. I did not fund it. I have not given any money to fund it. The only connection I have with that blog is that I have given them permission to reprint everything that I write about Josh Marquis. See, it turns out more than just I think that there's a problem here. Continuing, quote, "This is probably the most uncivil campaign that I've been around in my entire life," he notes. It's also the first time Marquis has had to go up against an established political machine in the fight over recreational pot. Belleville denies being behind the hit site and says he has no idea who put it up, though he assumes they'll contact him at some point in the future. For the record, after the Mercury contacted me, I did find out that the Josh Marquis Exposed is being run by some folks that I do know, and so we will be working together in the future. In their complaint, the 4 state lawmakers make a case that the educational tour taking place directly before an election over pot and featuring solely anti-marijuana speakers amounts to campaigning. And even though many groups have backed away from the effort in recent weeks, the legislators contend public employees still feature heavily. Quote, "Based on our review of the available materials, in 9 of the 12 counties where the tour is scheduled to appear, county workers are listed as sponsors," the letter reads. Those public employees are participating in the tour.
Let's party!